this started to give rise to Web3, which is all about ownership. It's
Mhm.
all about self-sovereignty. And that's a term that I think is beginning to kind of come into our lexicon, because it's all about, you own your data and only you. And you don't need to provide your personal information to engage with the service.
Hello, stereotype breakers, and welcome to yet another episode of the Meaningful Conversations podcast. So today's topic is Web3. We're going to dive into the acronyms and the buzzwords so that it all starts making sense. And today's guest makes sure that it does make sense, because I'm interviewing Sam, who you may have already seen me talk to in our other video on how to get a career in crypto. For those of you who don't know Sam yet, let me introduce you to her quickly before we jump into our conversation. Samantha is an educator and marketer who specializes in crypto. She has taught over 2,500 people blockchain fundamentals and has launched products for LinkedIn, Crunchbase, Chainalysis, and more. Her mission is to help people change their stories, whether they're an individual reshaping their finances or a breakthrough project wrestling with the right words. She's also the founder of Blockhead, which is a beginner-friendly resource for all things crypto. It was created to break through tech jargon, which, in crypto there's a lot of, and help people learn about cryptocurrency with easy-to-understand language. It fast-tracks users through beginner, intermediate, and advanced levels so they can feel confident navigating the Web3 world, from Bitcoin to NFTs to DAOs and more. I will leave an active link to the Blockhead in the description, so go ahead and check out Sam's work. All right, without further ado, let's dive into our conversation and demystify some of those buzzwords. DAO, crypto, NFT, Web3. Let's get into it. Hi, Sam. How are you doing?
Hey, Rasha. I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Awesome. Excited to talk about Web3 and finally understand what the hell it is.
Stoked. Glad to be here.
I'm very excited that we have a list of things to go through. So, let's just go straight into Web3. What is it and what is so different about it? And are there any examples of companies that are doing well so that we can, look at them and be like, oh, I finally get it,
Yeah, of course. Web3 can be very confusing. And I know it's a term that's being tossed around like lightning right now. So I think it's helpful to explain in context and how the web is evolving, right?
Mhm.
So right now we're in this stage where we're kind of between Web 2 and Web 3. To go back in time, if you remember, the 90s when computers first hit our kitchens and living rooms and were massive and looked like IKEA boxes, that was kind of Web 1. And a lot of times you were looking at static pages on the internet. You couldn't really interact with much. And then soon, email and different things came around where you actually started logging in and providing your info.
Mhm.
And so instead of this just like static read-only type internet, we started moving into a space where people were using platforms and would provide their information, and in exchange they were given a service. So that is Web 2.
Okay.
So essentially Web 2, we start to see all these centralized services pop up, right? So Google becomes this really convenient way to look for things on this massive internet where we don't know where anything is. And then all of a sudden, cookies start to come into play, and, the digital ones, not the chocolate chip ones.
Although we like both.
We
prefer
really
the chocolate type.
We really like the IRL cookies.
Yes.
So, then you start to see Facebook, you start to see these massive platforms start to explode. Specifically with content creators like yourself, a lot of times you're using different mediums in order to reach people.
Yep.
In exchange, they have your information, or they're taking a cut of the services, like you see with Etsy or with marketplaces where, there's more e-commerce going on. Eventually, this reaches a point, late 2000s, where people start to see this trend emerging. So certain things like DuckDuckGo, which is a different search engine, pops up. That's a little bit more privacy focused. You start to see the initial, beginning stages of this theme around like, wait a second, these platforms have so much information on us. Isn't this going to be a problem? And I want to pause and say that I know a lot of people, especially young people, are like, I don't care. Take my information, make things easier for me, which I completely understand too, right?
Yeah.
But there are certain scenarios and I think certain trends that we're seeing where, these platforms are starting to cross the line. and starting to get into dangerous territory. Another thing that we're seeing on the side of this, which is where crypto comes into play, is with monetary policy, with, the recession. We all saw the big bailouts. There was a very interesting TikTok I saw the other day about how it was like a parody of, this guy whining to the Congress being like, can I get another stimulus check? And they're like, nope. But then hedge funds and Robinhood go to them and they're like, wait, but I, accidentally kind of misplaced a couple $1 billion. And they're like, oh, poor baby. So you see these things happen, right? And so this started to give rise to Web3, which is all about ownership. It's all about self-sovereignty. And that's a term that I think is beginning to kind of come into our lexicon, because it's all about, you own your data and only you, and you don't need to provide your personal information to engage with the service.
I love that.
And so we start to see kind of, Web 1, I like to think of as a static line from point A to point B. Web 2, it's almost like a triangle. We have 3 points where we have the centralized platforms, a user, and then the end information or content that you're consuming. Web 3 suddenly becomes like a globe of interconnected points that are all connected with each other. And what this really means in terms of what you're experiencing is that instead of going to a platform and signing up, you're just automatically logging in. And I know that's a little confusing to think about without actually experiencing it, but an example is OpenSea. OpenSea is a marketplace where you buy an NFT, which we will get into later. It's a whole thing in its own. But to log in, you don't give them any of your information. All you do is connect your digital wallet, which has your personal information. It's shielded by OpenSea. OpenSea doesn't know who you are. However, you can still, transact on that marketplace and buy and sell whatever you want. And you are able to do that. They're just connecting you with a bunch of other people that are also privacy shield. Other examples of this are the browser Brave. So in Brave's case, they're a search engine and they can serve you ads, but they're actually going to pay you to put those ads in front of you.
Finally.
Right. So
somebody pays for my attention.
Exactly. So you're letting them have your data, but in exchange, you're actually getting the benefit. So these platforms are starting to emerge, much more secure, much more private. Web3 has also expanded into NFT, Metaverse, DeFi, and there's so much, and we can definitely cover it. But in a gist, Web3 is a way of experiencing the internet where you completely own all of your information.
Which is very hard to visualize because, again, having not experienced it, it's just a very interesting concept. But I feel like I just need to create accounts, or maybe not log in without creating accounts on all of those platforms and figure out how it works. And I'll probably film myself doing that because might as well.
Excellent. Great content.
But I like creating content where I look very lost. It's satisfying to me, weirdly.
It'll be interesting for you too, right? Because as a content creator, instead of going through platforms that take a cut or feed you very specific traffic, all of a sudden you can have your own audience. You get to directly connect with them. There's no middleman between you and your...
Oh, and that's been a huge theme in the content creation space, where they talk about whether you not own, but whether you can contact your followers directly, your audience directly, or if the platform one day decides to just close your account because they can for any reason, you lose whatever you've been building. So you have touched on the acronym that I want to dive in next, which is DeFi.
Yes.
What is DeFi?
DeFi is decentralized finance. And a way to think about it is that I like to think about it as new finance, right? So traditional finance, there's a very kind of calcified system in place. You obviously have the 1%ers that have significant capital, but also access to many tools that the other 99% do not. Other things I want to also talk about before I really dive into the technicals are, there are many countries in this world where people don't have access to financial services. They might live in a rural town where there is no bank nearby. And so they're relying on a cash system that is, fraught with lots of different issues. Yeah. Other things that we're seeing in other countries are, inflation happens and suddenly their fiat currency, or the currency that is government backed for their country, suddenly plummets in value. And while these things can feel very financy and abstract, when you're actually living it and you actually get into the user stories, that means suddenly people lose their life savings, or suddenly people cannot get the loan that they need because someone in their family has an emergency accident. So there are real consequences for kind of this gap that we've seen in traditional finance, and it's why decentralized finance has emerged. And it's basically taking this Web3 concept, but to money. And suddenly, you don't have to be an accredited investor or have, years at a traditional financial institution to trade at certain amounts or get certain yields. Decentralized finance is a whole ecosystem in itself with many different, platforms and things where your yields are crazy high for getting involved in early projects. And I do want to note in a cautionary way, like some protocols are more, have more integrity than others. And yes, of course, like anything that has money and people putting money into different pots for different periods of time, like there's going to be scams and hacks, as there is with our traditional system.
Yep.
It's just, nature of the beast. But it has really opened up like this whole sphere of financial tools that interconnect people, that bypass, all these barriers to entry that we typically have. Now, what this means on a user basis, maybe for you and I, could mean that we buy some crypto that we put into our digital wallet and we own that. No one can freeze that account. No one can, add fees on that if, unless we've agreed to that or we know that's part of the trade that we're doing. We can suddenly take that capital of ours and invest it in certain assets that, you have ideally done a lot of due diligence on and know what you're doing with. Don't start playing around with money that you're not afraid to lose. But we can also take part in decentralized financial services where we can put our money up and someone else can take a loan on it. You can get loans based on certain collateral that you put into play. And so a key piece of this that I want to explain too is something called a smart contract. And that is what makes DeFi possible, because the big difference between TradFi and DeFi, TradFi being traditional finance. Sorry.
Okay, I was just like traditional. Okay.
Traditional finance, that's a term that is also starting to become part of the lexicon too. Is just like the old way we've thought about things, right?
Yeah.
So because there's certifications and accreditations in place, that is because we needed a set of checks and balances. We needed some sort of middleman between two people to say, okay, this trade is going to happen.
Yep.
Both sides are reputable. Let's make it. With DeFi, that significant piece becomes automated. So a smart contract is able to execute something and able to kind of look at both sides of that agreement, verify them, and then once verified and locked in place, make whatever that trade is happen.
So robots stealing jobs.
Basically. Robots replacing TradFi. But because of smart contracts, it just blows open the world of finance. It allows a lot of wonderful and great things to happen in terms of financial inclusion, access to capital, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Of course, there is that slice that is not so great, hacks, scams, things like that, that you have to be careful of. Do your due diligence, use reputable platforms that have been around, that have been tried and tested, practicing best hygiene of cybersecurity, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just this whole new world, and it continues to develop and change every single day.
Seriously, I was doing a hike when there was a blockchain conference. Well, the hackathon where we met. We were on a hike and somebody was stuck. We were talking about NBA, an NBA game, and somebody was like, "Is that another acronym I just don't know?" Somebody from Europe. So I was like, "No, this is a basketball association. This is all." But somebody in the field is like, "Oh my God, yet another acronym," So that's super, super interesting. It's like, dang, it's growing and just developing every single day. And, okay, more acronyms for you. The next thing that I want to talk about, which, relates into everything else, is NFTs. So what are NFTs and how do they fit into this whole ecosystem?
Yeah, of course. I think there's a lot of confusion around NFTs. Yeah. And I think, we're going to see more of them. They're not going away. So NFT stands for non-fungible token. Fungibility means that something can be, traded. It's all the same. It's basically the same kind of unit. Non-fungible means it's very unique.
Mm-hmm.
In a tech way of explaining it, an NFT is a unique smart contract. So what that means is that it only happens once. It's unique in terms of, it cannot be replicated.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's a smart contract, it proves ownership.
Okay.
And because all of this is in some sort of blockchain, it means that it cannot be tampered with. It is like a set in stone record, right? So there will always be a chain of ownership with that specific thing. So non-fungible token, a token can be many different things. Right now, NFTs, when people think of them, they think of, digital art.
Yeah.
So an NFT could be a digital art piece of a monkey.
Yeah.
And that can have money attached to it, right? And so if someone were to sell their NFT, it's the same as selling a real piece of art where, they get compensated. But because it's digital, there's a record of ownership. There's a record of, this person paid this much at this time for it.
Mm-hmm.
Other things can be baked into that because it's a smart contract. So like the original artist could program something in where it's like anytime this piece of art is resold, they get royalties.
Okay.
Right. Now, one thing I want to point out before we fully dive into the NFT art market, which is largely what NFTs are considered as now, an NFT could be anything. It could be a mortgage. It could be a lease on a car. Any sort of contract you could think of could be an NFT.
So I was just thinking like, so an NFT is almost like a patent?
It could be a patent. Yeah, absolutely. It's anything that proves ownership over something unique.
Okay. And sorry, before we dive deeper into it, just to understand, so it prevents from this piece of thing from being copied. Does it somehow search the internet for, let's say, the same artist decides to create the same piece of art and put it up for sale? How is that preventable?
So there's no way it could have the same record of ownership, even if it was the same look and feel. It would have a different number. So an example of this is like, Toyota makes a ton of the same exact car.
Yeah.
Each one of those cars has a different VIN number.
Oh, so it's like my phone has a serial number, and because of that, it's unique to yours, even though it might be
the same product.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So NFTs are really interesting for digital art and for artists because in that kind of like Web3 ownership way, they're being paid directly unless they use a marketplace and they agree, okay, this person can take my fee because I'll, have more exposure with my art piece, much more control. Also, when you talk about art, traditional artists, a lot of times they sell their painting, they sell their work, whatever it is. After that first sale, they don't see anything.
Yeah.
It might go up in value because of their work and what they're doing on the side and growing their name in some way, growing their following. But in this way, in the digital art market, they have a trail. And there is another piece to the NFT market too, and that's all about community. When we talk about NFTs in terms of the digital art market, which is largely what we're dealing with now.
Yeah.
A lot of people hate on NFTs because they're like, I'm sorry, you just dropped a couple $100,000 on a digital monkey. What? And I understand it from the outside. But when you actually see what they're getting, it's not that they're just buying that piece of art. They're actually buying their way. That is a token into a community.
I see.
And that's why these NFTs have blown up, because things like Bored Ape Yacht Club, this example I keep using, they have, celebrities, they have an incredible community of people that will come together. They'll throw, events on actual yachts, like in New York, around NFT NYC and conferences that you want to get into. You want to be part of this community where you have access to Jimmy Fallon and Paris Hilton or Steph Curry, Eminem, I think, is also a holder. It's just an incredible network of people, right? And they do things that give back to the community. They allow you to, maybe create other Bored Ape offshoots that are still going to be worth money. And then not just that, but it's not like you're just putting $100,000 in, you get access to a community and that's it. You can always say, hey, this community actually isn't for me and I'm going to sell. You get your money back or more for the most part because these communities tend to grow, right? So it's also kind of an investment.
Yeah.
So a lot of people play these NFT markets and say, okay, this project has a really stellar community or a really stellar plan in place. So I'm going to buy a couple of these NFTs and sit on them for a year. And then as that community grows, as NFTs become more valuable,
Yeah.
they sell later.
Interesting. Okay, well that explains a lot, because I was off the impression that it's just like you really are in love with this picture of a monkey and you just need to have it.
Yeah, exactly. Nope. It's usually not just the art, although the art is really dope and
Yeah.
can be beautiful too.
Of course.
Not taking away from that, but yeah, the community aspect is massive as well as the investment piece.
Very interesting. Okay, now a lot of things are starting to make sense, which brings me to my next point, which is the metaverse.
Yeah.
And how is that, like, the metaverse? I understand it as this augmented reality video game kind of thing. Well, not augmented, sorry, virtual reality video game kind of thing. But then how is it related with Web3 and NFTs? Like, what's how does that work?
There is a lot to explain with the metaverse. Funding has jumped by like incredible leaps and bounds in the last year or two with the metaverse, because the thinking is that we will largely interact with each other through the metaverse. I think people will move away from platforms like Facebook where they're interacting and maybe chatting in a messenger box, moving away from things like Zoom where, you know, you have a camera on each of you and, you know, you hurry up and like clean your desk off right before you turn the camera on and whatever, fix your hair.
Example here today earlier.
But instead you can actually enter the metaverse. You have your own person. You make them look like however you want. You can still interact with people. Your voice is still there. You have complete ownership over what you look like. You don't need to log into Zoom or log into Facebook where they have your information. They're, you know, tracking what you're doing. Instead, you know, that ownership piece is still in play. The metaverse is not taking your information, but yet you're able to join and you can connect with anyone in the world.
Interesting.
So things like there was a Metaverse Fashion Week the other week, which was really incredible.
What? I missed that?
Yeah. And from a user's perspective, it's kind of like The Sims, but it's you.
Okay.
It's you as the main character,
Oh,
right?
I would be rocking the most bold outfits.
Oh yeah, I had a mohawk. It was
Really?
amazing.
You did?
Yeah, it was incredible.
Okay. When there's a next time there's a fashion week or something like that, let me know. I'll go with you.
I'll keep you posted.
Please.
Yeah.
And I'll vlog about it, because I don't know if I can, but we'll try.
Yeah. No, I'm sure you could like kind of record it in some way, but I've never had a mohawk before. I always thought it was kind of like a cool, interesting look, and I was able to use it in the metaverse and then interact with like coworkers who were there, and I got to like meet random people, so it was also networking. But you know, I have my little figure in Decentralized, which was the metaverse where it was hosted. So yeah, the metaverse, there's a lot more to it, right? Because a lot of brands are starting to actually buy like land in the metaverse and like buy different plots where they can build things. One project I recently worked on was actually a psychedelics company who wants to open up access to mental health services in the metaverse.
That's awesome.
So people can go and, you know, it's still private, you know, they can still be anonymous and just use their voice or a voice changer if they're like really intense about it, and actually get access to mental health services that they wouldn't otherwise be able to. So I think we can see a lot of different things happen in the metaverse. But yeah,
that's amazing. Also, just a little side note, which I was thinking about, you know, I feel like that's taking our newfound laziness of we want to work in sweatpants to the next level. Because we really do not have to do anything. We could be in bed, but we're attending a networking event.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's just a little side note. But moving on to yet another thing that is kind of a Web3 concept, a concept that has, from what I understand, is a spin-off of this whole Web3 technology and the possibilities that it brings, which is a DAO. What are DAOs, and you know, how do they work, and do you have any examples of successful DAOs out there, again, just to see how it works, like beyond the concept?
Yeah, DAOs are dope. I'm not going to lie. I had trouble understanding them at first. Actually, when I was first thinking about a job in Web3, I was chatting to someone I, you know, was connected with in the community. And they're like, well, do you want to work for someone or do you want to just work for a DAO. And I was like, what do you mean work for a DAO? And they're like, well, you can just propose projects to different DAOs and like be paid on a project basis if the DAO, kind of is down with whatever it is that you want to provide. And I thought that was really interesting. And that was kind of the seed that planted DAOs for me like a couple years ago. DAOs have since exploded in, I would say, 2021 and 2022. So it stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. And kind of my like way of explaining it in a really easy way is it's basically a club. But it is your Web3 version of a club where, it is a community of people and everyone votes on things. So it's not like there's some head honcho calling the shots. There might be some sort of admin or organizers that maybe the club appoints and votes on and says, actually they're great, they're really organized, let's appoint them to drive things. DAOs can operate in any way they want, any type of community. I have a couple examples I'll get into in a second. Some of them are free to join. Other of them have their own token to join. So one is called Friends with Benefits. It's a massive DAO. Essentially, it's a network of people across all different, verticals in the sector. You have creatives, you have founders, you have just people that are like influencers or writers, all types, right? But like a really interesting, engaged community. And they throw very cool events all over the place. So they'll do like really interesting dinners. As they've grown, they've, thrown events at like Meow Wolf, which is like this gorgeous art space in Denver where they had DJs and, free drinks, and everyone just kind of like chats and mingles and is able to like explore the art. I think they're doing an event in the desert later this year where they're going to have like music, art, food, talks, panels. Crazy, right? And because you're a part of it, you can just go, you can bring a guest. Now, the tokens for them are really interesting because when they first came out, their tokens were, a couple of dollars each. And to become part of the DAO, you buy a handful of tokens, and then that money actually goes into the treasury of the DAO. So a DAO has a treasury, and the community of that DAO can vote on what they do with that money. They can say, let's donate to this cause, like, Ukraine. They can say, let's throw this massive show just for our community as like a kickback. Let's hold talks with really, prominent music artists just to talk about, art and music and how it's evolving. Just like really interesting things, right? And this is what the Friends with Benefits community I'm talking about specifically. And because they've been providing their community and using the treasury and doing really, really well, attracting really interesting individuals to their network, their token price has gone up. So while it was maybe a couple of dollars to join when they first launched, now those tokens, because they're tradable on a marketplace, are now worth like $75 each.
Wow. Good for them.
Instead of, mere cents. And so now the barrier to entry is like a couple $1,000s just to get into the DAO. And It's become one of these kind of exclusive, top of the line type DAOs. Another DAO I want to also talk about that's like totally different is one called Pizza DAO.
I love that.
Pizza DAO. There's also Burger DAO. There's like many that are like this too. But for instance, at ETH Denver, where we met at the conference, they threw an event at this really interesting space in Denver, and they just provided free pizza.
Oh, I remember. It was at the Church of Cannabis?
Yeah, they got a really interesting venue, Church of Cannabis. They also partnered with another DAO called CannaDAO. But Pizza DAO's whole mission is they just want to give free pizza to the world.
And I love that mission.
It's so simple. It's so easy. There's not this high barrier to entry. They're not throwing these like glamorous events with like prominent music artists. They're literally just giving out free pizza.
I have a friend who needs to be part of that DAO.
It's really funky. They're super fun, but like it just shows you a DAO can be anything. There are DAOs, MetaWork DAO, you join to try and find the right job for you in Web3. There's Builder DAO, where a lot of devs go to talk about different projects. There's some DAOs that actually act as VCs, where they vote on who to fund. So projects come to them looking for funding. So it can really be anything. Like open up your imagination. There's even a David DAO, which is just a DAO of people with the first name David.
Hey, to each their own.
So it can be anything, but it's a really interesting way of organizing people and kind of, channeling capital together as a group for what you believe in or what you want.
So we will talk about this in private, but I have a note in my phone and my notes app, ideas for DAOs for mothers, working mothers. We'll talk about that later. But you stay tuned as well, please.
Mama DAO.
Mama DAO. Did it just? Was it just born? Was it just born?
Possibly.
Hey, I like it. Mama DAO. So, I mean, there's so much to this world, right? There's the metaverse, there's the NFTs, there's, and a lot of it involves money. Like you said, inevitably, there will be some bad actors who don't have the best intentions when it comes to taking advantage of people. So how can we avoid scams when it comes to exploring this whole new world and accessing this decentralized financial market, etc.?
I think it's a great question, and it's something that it just comes with the nature of decentralized finance. It comes with ownership, right?
Yeah.
If you're owning all your stuff, you got to be a little bit more responsible. It just, instead of trusting a bank to hold your money, you're trusting yourself. With that, just being really practicing due diligence, research what you're doing. Don't, see a TikTok video of something that's like, yo, this crypto is going to the moon, let's go. Because more often than not, that's not something that like has actual legs behind it.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that, they're just paying money for influencers to shout about, and it's not actually going anywhere. So I would say, do not get your advice from YouTube or TikTok or influencers.
Anybody who gives you advice while dancing, not a credible thing.
Anything with arm movements, don't trust. Don't trust it.
Red flag.
Huge red flag. I think as people get more familiar with the space, you will be much more, you'll have a better eye for knowing, hey, is this a scam? If anyone contacts you and is like, hey, this is free Bitcoin or whatever, or reaches out on a one-on-one basis, don't trust those. I mean, I even see it with Instagram. I'll follow an influencer and then I'll have a copycat influencer profile message me about something. So we're already seeing that across the board. So I would just be very wary. You'll be able to spot them more often than not once you get involved. And then just practicing good cybersecurity. So if you get like a weird email, always check where that email is coming from. Especially, one thing I've seen too is like, let's say you're operating on Coinbase to buy and sell crypto. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you might get an email and it's like Coinbase, but like it doesn't have an E or something kind of sketchy. And it's like, hey, this is support. We want you to like reset your password, like enter your current password here. That's clearly like a phishing scam, right? These platforms are never going to ask you for any password.
No.
At least decentralized, exchanges. I think other things to keep in mind is like good wallet hygiene. So whether you have an NFT or you have crypto that you're trying to store, any sort of digital asset, making sure that you're being careful with your wallet, right? Yeah. So making sure that you have a backup code written down on a piece of paper somewhere instead of stored on your phone, where if someone hacks into your phone or grabs your phone, they have access to. There's so many things. I'm actually teaching a wallet workshop that goes over a lot of this through the Blockhead, because when it comes to digital wallets, also you have a lot of different options based on what you're interacting with. If you're trading every day, you're going to use a digital wallet that's easy to, get in and out of, or maybe a browser extension like MetaMask, which is a super easy, safe way to, trade assets quickly just online. If you're holding assets for the long term, a cold storage wallet that actually is like a physical device that keeps that keeps your stuff offline, is going to be the most safe, because if someone were to hack into your computer, there'd be no way for them to access that. That comes with its own, set of responsibilities. Of course, you don't want to lose your device and like lose the seed phrase for getting into that device. But even though this sounds like a lot and it sounds really scary, it becomes second nature once you start interacting with stuff, right? Just how right now, a lot of times if someone were to explain, like, how do you remember all your passwords for all of the things that you log into?
Password manager,
or like in your head, right? You can just kind of memorize a bunch of things. That in itself sounds daunting. Password manager probably sounds daunting to some people.
There's a trade-off to security, right?
Yes.
Convenience versus security is a constant trade-off, and you have to decide where you stand on that.
Exactly.
Like how comfortable you are with the risks, essentially. Like how much do you want convenience versus Yeah.
Exactly. So I would say careful where you're getting your information.
Mm-hmm.
So although you can learn about some interesting projects and like new DeFi protocols that are legit on Twitter and things like that, be very wary if someone's like advertising it in some way. I would say it really drills down to doing your research and being wary of anything that is too good to be true.
Yeah.
Practicing good cybersecurity hygiene, not waving your passwords around or, being really careful about who you're replying to or if you get random messages one off. And then lastly, it's honestly just becoming more familiar with the space. So if you start reading newsletters from big publications like CoinDesk or The Defiant, you will start to recognize certain protocol names and then be like, oh, okay, this is like actually a legit DeFi protocol. They're backed by certain investors. It's not some random thing that sprung up and is promising like 10,000% yield. So even though it sounds daunting and scary, you'll be fine. Just like, be careful, keep an eye out. You'll get familiar with it.
Double check your resources. And for phishing scams, I will leave a link to a video on how to recognize a phishing scam that I did with a friend who works in cybersecurity and just digs into an email and shows, a Coinbase without an E or Coinbase with using 0 instead of an O in the because you can buy those domains and pretend to be someone else, and it's what a lot of scammers do. So yeah, be careful. Yeah. And also I'm going to link your blog in the description, so for whoever wants to take that workshop and see other resources that you have on there, that they can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of what we chatted about today, I actually dive into in many different courses. There's one on DAOs, one on NFTs. Yeah, it runs the gamut. One last thing I do want to note when we're talking about scams and hackers is actually ransomware. So ransomware has become a really massive issue in the last few years. If you ever get a message that's like, hey, we've caught you doing this crazy thing that you have not done or have done, maybe, who knows, you need to pay up, in Bitcoin through this link, don't pay. There are so many people that end up paying and they don't have any information on you. It's a ransomware scheme. It's all over the place. It happens all the time. It's something that is one of those like dirty or bad actor things that's kind of inherent with the digital age that we will get better at eventually. But right now I would just say do not fold for a ransomware attack. You don't need to.
Yeah, a lot of the times it's just social engineering, right?
Yeah.
They make it look like they have things on you, and they don't, because they've done their research.
Yeah.
They've done their research on you, and they might know, the coffee shop that you go to every day because you've posted on it. You posted about it on Instagram. Like that goes back to cyber hygiene and all of that stuff, and just being wary, not just when it comes to crypto, but also just generally how much information you are sharing out there, because you'd be surprised. We ran a cybersecurity workshop for creators, and as part of that we did an experiment where people volunteers, they were like, dig up information on me based on my accounts, and so they gave us some accounts, some of the stuff that I have found myself, and I'm not I can be creepy, but not to the level of someone who is professional and earns a living from it. Some of the stuff that I found, I was like, well, this is scary. Like the virtual can become offline very quickly. Like it could endanger you if somebody wanted to put you in danger. So,
and I think that actually loops back to our initial conversation about Web3, right? Because the more we have ownership over our data, the less information about us is floating out there.
Yeah.
I think a big thing with centralized platforms is that they become a honeypot of so much data.
Yes.
And because it's centralized in one place, that is like a huge target for hackers. And once they have that, then they have information on so many people that they can use for illicit purposes. So ideally, the more that we move into the Web3 age, actually the less that we'll see of that. But
100%. However, we do need to understand that we have probably more responsibility over some of the safety, because it's not the big platforms that have to hire red teams, purple teams, to make sure that their information is safe and secure, but it's us. We have to be more proactive about our cybersecurity, which
completely.
Hey, those are good habits to have regardless.
Yeah. Ownership of your data, ownership of your cybersecurity.
Absolutely.
It's all included, yeah.
Thank you so much. This conversation has just put a lot of things, put a lot of floating puzzles together And now I'm not as afraid of exploring this world, because before that I was just like, there's this, and now I can kind of see how it's interconnected, and it's just been incredibly useful for me, and I hope for anyone who's watching or listening to the podcast episode.
Yeah, I'm so glad. Yeah, and the Blockhead has a ton of information on it. And I'm always wondering, like, what are your questions? What's your feedback? This space is constantly evolving. So, yeah, I'm just so happy we had this conversation too. I think it's fun to talk about.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Masha.
Sam, thank you so much. This conversation has helped my brain wrap itself around some of the concepts, and honestly made sense of all of these different buzzwords that and concepts that are out there that just felt like they're abstract, and now I understand more, and I feel much more confident about joining a DAO or getting an NFT and seeing what it's like, because I understand now that it's not just a picture of a monkey. There's a whole world, community, all of that stuff behind it. So super interesting. And again, all of the links with Sam's work with the Blockhead will be in the description. So make sure you go ahead and check all of her stuff out. I know she is working on courses. So by the time this episode airs, she might have a lot of courses for you in store. So go ahead and check it out. And if not, sign up to the waiting list, because I mean, you've seen her explain things, and I'm going to be doing those courses with you, because we need this information. We need it to be explained in such a digestible manner. Thank you for being here. Let me know in the comments what you thought about this video, if it made sense, like if you had an aha moment, what it was about, what was the example that Sam used that, made things click. And just, talk to us about what you think about the future of Web3, the future of crypto, the future of this whole ecosystem. Like this episode if you enjoyed it, share it with a friend who also wants to understand these concepts, and of course, subscribe to this channel, subscribe to this podcast on your podcasting platform of choice. And let's be friends on other social media. You can find us as Stereotype Breakers. Have a wonderful time the day you're currently experiencing.